Welcome to the third video in this series of our efforts to get a 1974 Mercury Capri ready for the 24 Hour of Lemons race. We are working on the 2005 Ford Mustang that donated its V6 engine and 5-speed transmission to the cause. And now I want the wiring harness and the computers that I need to make that engine run. And, the beauty of 24 Hours of Lemons is it's an amateur racing sport, and I qualify. I don't know how a 2005 Ford Mustang goes together or what's involved in the wiring or computers. I just know that, I hope anyway, that this harness can be divided into a dash harness, of engine bay harness with the computers that run the engine, and then the everything else harness for like lights and anti-lock brakes and audio and what have you. So that's the hope. The reality ends up being different for people who know the Mustang. I basically get digging into it, hoping I could do it through the glove box, but instead go, all right, the dash is going to come out if we're going to do this. And then you can see the rest of the interior I've kind of stacked in the car to save space. But as I'm looking at the harnesses, it looks like it's one big harness and that it runs down both sides of the car, and that I'm going to have to take some of it out of the back from under the seats also. So I just kind of go, yep, I'm going to have to gut this car, which isn't a bad thing because I need to sell all these pieces to offset the cost of the Mustang. We want to keep the cost of the overall project under $500, so you can sell pieces off the car to offset the cost of the car. The Mustang was cheap enough that once we sell, we won't even have to sell all of these trim pieces and all our extras. I think we're going to end up money ahead on the Mustang. Anyway, we get all the way to taking the carpet out so I can see what I'm really dealing with. Again, I keep hoping for, hey, there's going to be a disconnect here from front and rear harness, or a left side and right side harness. And so far, no, that hasn't been the case. So I just keep going. Here we're just kind of undoing clips that hold the main harness down the passenger side. And then we'll start trying to deal with, there's this computer up in the passenger side footwell. You'll notice as I take things apart, they do get labeled with blue, each end gets labeled with blue painter's tape where I write what it came from and where it's supposed to go, so that we can hopefully put it all back together again. Here, I've decided I've got to take the heater core out. So this is what's left of the air conditioning system. And we're going to move that over and put it with air conditioning system pieces to sell. And then these are heater hose with a little bit of persuasion. Those came off. And then the heater core itself, fan and everything, we won't need that. So it'll go up for sale. And now I get to see that, nope, the right side and the left side harness are connected with no union to disconnect the two. So far, this is all one big harness. I'm just disconnecting the parts from the pedal assemblies, or the wiring from the pedal assemblies, and then we're disconnecting the main harness down the driver's side. From here, I think I move back up to the engine bay. Yeah. Basically, one of the main wiring harnesses goes to the anti-lock brake manifold, and because of the accident, this manifold's been pushed back some, and I can't disconnect the wiring from it. So I've got to take the whole manifold out. And that's okay, because I actually might be able to use the manifold in the Mercury. So I was going to take it anyway. That, and I find part of the harness goes up to the windshield wiper motor. And rather than cut it, I said, well, we probably get some money for the windshield wiper motor too, so let's just go ahead and take this apart and save the harness. We're not gonna cut any of this harness. So once it's, actually I think I had to remove the motor in order to get at the harness. So now that part of the harness has been undone, and now we finally have room to move this driver's side harness out of the engine bay and up through the firewall and into the cab. I'm sure it's in these stop motions, but I've also disconnected the door wiring. Fortunately, that was a sub harness that you undid at the hinge, and so the doors will lift off with the motors and glass and everything, and I'll be able to sell those as their own units. Now, the pedal assembly, it's interesting, the accelerators fly by wire, and we'll probably go ahead and use the clutch and brake assembly as well with that master cylinder and reservoir. It will have a better boost than the Mercury's, so I think we'll just use it. Okay, so now we're at the fuse box on the passenger side, and it took me a minute to figure out that, you unbolt these connections through the bottom, label each one of those, and then I finally get a couple sub harnesses. This one ends up being its own harness, and then the next one also ends up being its own harness, so that was nice. We ended up with, we ended up with a couple more sub harnesses versus all of them together. Most of it's all together, though. That was a computer that lives up there on the passenger side. That came out. And now I finally have a harness that I can pull through the firewall on the passenger side. And so you see me doing that there. We end up with a spare antenna wire. We won't need that. There's one more computer that lives in the footwell on the driver's side, another computer that lives in the center, probably under the radio. And then we move underneath to get that last harness that runs the anti-lock brakes on the rear. It also probably runs the fuel pump and the fuel sending unit. And it also is connected to some kind of emissions controls that live underneath the spare tire well, probably some sort of charcoal canister, I had to guess. Anyway, this ends up being a separate harness. I missed the connection up top, and so I was like, I could have left that. But anyway, we got it out, and now we finally have this huge harness associated with the Mustang, but it's all complete. Nothing's been cut. Everything's labeled. We'll be able to put it into the Capri and decide what we want to use and not use. But it ended up being more work to do this than to take the engine and transmission out. We also still have the dash to do. I've got to decide what I need out of that. But stay tuned, lots more to take off this Mustang.